an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 2, Episode 9, My Mother, the Fiend. In this episode, which I originally did as a live watch on Facebook, there are so many surprises. I don't even know where to start. One of the most surprising things is that Veronica's mother was not always terrible. And there's also the tiny little detail about Meg being fucking pregnant. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Renee for commissioning this episode and for commissioning the live watch of this episode. I enjoyed doing the live watch a lot. This was a good one to choose because there are a lot of shocking kind of fist pump moments, especially when it has to do with Trina. And then the, of course, last shot of Meg is just really like completely unexpected. I never saw that shit coming. And I feel like that has directly to do with the bus crash. I don't have a ton of evidence for that, obviously, but I feel like that has to be a factor. I feel like, and bear with me on this because again, I'm just spitballing. I feel like Meg might have been sleeping with somebody that she was not supposed to be sleeping with. And that led to maybe a wife or a husband, but I would say it would have to be because she's got impregnated. So yeah, it would have to be heterosexual sex, but that does not mean that it had to be Anyway, I'm just trying to say somebody was being cheated on and found out that Meg was pregnant and decided to take care of the problem. Now, my issue with that as a theory is that this would have to be a person who was also willing to kill a bus full of kids in order to deal with Meg. That feels like a lot. I'm not sure that's, so this is something that's like in my head vaguely, but I'm not like married to the idea. And it doesn't really account for the rat either. And Veronica takes the rat being taped there as like proof that they were after her. Because she, I guess, is the rat that turned in Aaron. But I feel like there's something else going on there. Like, I don't know. I just think that I don't think it was about Veronica in the end. I don't know why that is, but I feel like it wasn't. I feel like that was just I don't even know that the rat being taped there has anything to do with the actual explosion. I can't help but wonder if those are two totally separate, unrelated things. Like one of them was just a prank and the other one was something, and they just don't have anything to do with one another. And I understand how unlikely it is that those two things would be happening at the same time on the same bus and not be related. But I feel like what's really the point of taping a rat there and then blowing the bus up and taping it in a place that nobody's going to find it? It's not like they made a display of this rat as like a means to send a message before they killed somebody. This was in a hidden spot just to stink and mess with people. That feels like not a threat or anything. It feels like somebody who just wanted to mess with everybody. So I don't know. I have a lot of like conflicting ideas about a lot of the bits of information that we're being fed as the season continues. I would like to draw your attention, please. One moment. Everybody, please say hello to Cookie. Cookie is my new kitten. She adopted me. a couple of days ago. She ran at me and decided that she was going to be mine and come home with me, and I had no say in the matter whatsoever. And Cookie is one of the snuggliest, cuddliest, sweetest girls that's ever lived in the entire world. And she really likes to be held. So I will be holding her throughout part of this episode, and she is going to purr into the microphone, and I hope that you guys are all okay with that. All right, let's start off this episode, because the main issue, the episode is called My Mother the Fiend, and the main thing that happens is that Veronica, the vice principal, who I suspect has known for some time, but he finally decides to play his trump card, that he is aware Veronica has keys to a bunch of facilities that she should not, and that she's able to get into his office, that she's able to get into his file cabinet. And he basically threatens her with suspension, which will cause her to lose any chance at the Kane scholarship that she is relying on to go to school, unless she decides to do some menial work for him. And when the episode, cut to the next scene, where he's having her deal with, old student records, my immediate reaction was, why are you having Veronica deal with student records when you know that this bitch cannot be trusted with that kind of sensitive information? The whole thing is that she was spying and stealing shit that was personal about students in the first place. And you're putting her down here? This feels ridiculous. But it turns out it's on purpose. He is completely aware what she's like and what she is bound to do when she finds out a certain piece of information. So he sets her up so that he can... I would like to think there's more... It's presented as if he is just doing this in order to get the principal job. I would like to think it's because he wants to be principal and because he knows that the principal is a corrupt piece of shit dude who fucks students. And that he thinks maybe this guy not having this job and having consequences for his shitty actions would be a good thing for the world. I'm assigning him that motivation because I would like to think that he cares about that. But I don't really have anything to back that up. It's just what I want to believe. Just let me have this, okay? So anyway, Veronica finds the file that has her mother's name on it and finds out that her mother was it suspended because of spreading malicious rumors. And Veronica starts to look into this a little bit more. Of course, he comes in on her a couple of times and says something about how you're supposed to be organizing these. You aren't supposed to be reading them. It's like he knows that by telling her to stay out of it, that's just going to encourage her, and he's goading her. But one of the girls in the suspension report is present-day teacher who is going through a nasty divorce, who we saw reading a self-help book, Divorce at 40, Starting Over, I think was the name of it, something like that. And that woman does not want to talk to Veronica. She basically is like, your mom got in trouble because she didn't know how to mind her own fucking business and keep her mouth shut, and maybe you should learn to do that and learn from her mistake. And, of course, Veronica's like, lol, no, that's totally not what I'm going to do. And she starts to press the issue, and she finds out that Celeste Kane, that is her last name now. I think it was it Cunningham? Something like that. Was involved with this whole thing. And that it's possible Celeste got knocked up out of wedlock. It's either that or Veronica's mother made up a rumor that Celeste was knocked up when she was not. But apparently she there's a whole series of convoluted half truths and facts. And what it boils down to is that she claimed she was pregnant and showed up at prom and there was no baby. And suddenly there was no speaking of this pregnancy anymore. And Veronica goes to her dad and asks him to find out whether or not there was a baby born with that last name in the hospital around that time. And he doesn't find anything, but he does see a news article about a discovery of a baby that was abandoned in the bathroom at the prom that year. And Veronica's like, oh, really? Now, Veronica has a vested interest in humiliating Celeste. Let's talk about the fact that Duncan didn't tell his mom that he was dating Veronica again. I am big mad about this. I'm not going to lie to you guys. The way that Duncan has been acting all season really irritates me. And I feel like what the show is trying to get me to believe is that Meg's baby is Duncan's. And I got to tell y'all, I don't buy that for a second. Not for a second. I think that there's some other whole thing going on that Duncan maybe knew about. And that's why he's having these dreams about how only he can save her, yada, yada, yada. But I don't think that this is his baby. I really think if he had an inkling that she was pregnant and that there was any possibility that it might be his, he is too upstanding a citizen. I don't think that he would ever keep that secret. I don't think he could. I don't think his conscience would be able to deal with that. And sure, his conscience may be plaguing him, and that's exactly what these dreams are. It's possible, but I just don't in my gut think that's what's going on. And the fact that he's not telling his mom, the whole reason that Veronica was such a bad choice in his mother's eyes was the potential that Veronica was related to him. And the fact that Veronica was the daughter of a woman that obviously Celeste did not get along with and that was fucking her husband for a time there. I really, as far as who Veronica's mother was, Celeste needs to get over it. And in terms of that, that's none of Duncan's business how she chooses to cope with that aspect of the story. The only thing that is valid is her being worried that Duncan and Veronica are related, which we now know is not true. So as far as I'm concerned, if that concern is set aside and we have dealt with that and we know that's not a problem, Celeste doesn't get to say shit and Duncan should tell her the truth. And the fact that he doesn't really bums me out. And the fact that he is in the middle of trying to cover and get Veronica to leave because his mother's coming. And he doesn't even have the balls in this moment to be like, okay, look, I'm really sorry, but I haven't told my mom about us. And can you just lay low? I know I have to talk to her about it. I know I should have by now. And I will tonight, I swear. But can you just duck out of the way for a bit so that we don't have to have a big blow up right here? And I'll have an opportunity to have an adult conversation with her at dinner. But rather than do that, Duncan decides that he's going to try and rush Veronica out the door into a hotel hallway where Veronica would have nowhere to go and is doubtless going to run into his mother, and his mother's going to know why she's here. There's nobody else she's here to see. Come on. And it's just so poorly thought out. And he is so, he just comes across as so pathetic in that moment where you realize that he's just been lying. And it's so insulting. I have been friends with a lot of different women who have had secret relationships for one reason or another. And there are times where, for reasons like your office doesn't allow dating or whatever, there are times where there's something that's sort of exciting and fun about that. But there have been a few where the dude has clearly wanted to keep it on the DL and the woman has no real idea that that's happening. I've had a couple friends who it was clear to me, the guy they were with was keeping them at arm's length and taking them places that nobody else would run into them, making sure that they only hung out at his place or her place where people wouldn't see. It seemed so obvious to me. And Duncan has not been doing that with Veronica because he's not living at home. For one thing, he's living in this hotel. So why is he going to be running into his mom? He's been emancipated. And so there's no like moment of me being like, oh, Veronica, you should have known. I wouldn't blame her for it, even if she should have known. But I can't even have that satisfaction of like, oh, there were all these signs and I can't believe that you were just so blinded by love that you didn't realize. No, this was genuinely a complete shock to me that they've been dating for a while now and he pursued her pretty aggressively. And to be doing all of this and not tell his mother anything about it just feels like inviting humiliation. And that's just, I can't abide that, man. Like, that's unforgivable to me. And it grosses me out that his mother is willing to like stand there and insult this teenage girl's mom. Like, yeah, you have a problem with her mother. Sure. Holy shit, woman, grow up. That is not her fucking problem. Get a grip. You are a grown-ass adult. She is not responsible for her mother's choices. Your son is fair game, and you need to fucking come to terms with your shit. And also, as a parent, she should know that, like, telling him not to have any associations with that girl is just gonna, like, sweeten the pot a little bit. Maybe not for somebody like Duncan with his personality. He's not somebody who, like, is rebellious or defiant just for the sake of it. But, like, Celeste, what it comes down to really is that when Veronica is faced with whether or not she's trying to find the truth because the truth matters, or she's trying to find the truth because she just wants to humiliate Celeste, I can't even be mad at her for wanting to humiliate Celeste. This is a really interesting episode in that regard, because Veronica has not been hired by anybody. She has been manipulated into a situation in which she saw information, and that is it. And she decides to take everything on herself because she is curious. And in other episodes, when she's been investigating things, you know, it's somebody hired her who is being ripped off, who thinks they're being cheated on, whose parent abandoned them and ran away, who she's investigating Lily's murder, so there's a murderer walking free. There's all kinds of really justifiable moments of Veronica doing questionable things and ethically gray things because she's just trying to get to the bottom of a lie and find out what really happened. That is not this episode. She is trying to get to the bottom of something out of spite and purely, like, maliciously wants to hurt a person involved in this story. That's not her MO usually. We don't see that from her a lot. Veronica's just not a spiteful person usually. Like, it's not like she doesn't have moments of gleefulness when she sees a certain person being, like, getting theirs in the end. Of course. I mean, we all have that. But she doesn't go out of her way to just fuck with people. Even though she could. She has the ability to find all kinds of information. And if she was a spiteful person, these talents of hers for uncovering this sort of thing would be really, really handy. But she doesn't abuse her power. And watching her wrestle with this and have the self-awareness to know that maybe I'm doing this for the wrong reasons. Maybe I'm just trying to hurt somebody. I really appreciated that the show was willing to go here and show us that Veronica is not like pure as the driven snow. She is not somebody who's always just trying to do the right thing. She is a human being with, you know, desires and impulses and streaks of, you know, wanting revenge or whatever that all of us have. And she's a teenager as well. So yeah, she's going to make bad decisions sometimes, or she's going to make the right decisions for the wrong reasons. And this winds up working out in the end, but it all turns out to be like an accident, kind of, how it works out. I'm going to finish this particular plot line, then we'll talk about other stuff that goes on. But Veronica she finds out that there is a woman who is now a lunch lady, and she is deaf. And this woman hung out around her mother a lot. And she goes to this woman trying to talk to her about who her mother was and what she was like, trying to get a better grasp on what her mother was like in high school. And if she was like one of the mean girls, if she was somebody who would just make up a rumor in order to fuck up Celeste's life. Because really, Veronica like had an idea of her mom being a pretty decent person. And then her mom disappears with a check for $50,000 for her father, and fucking we never hear from her again. So Veronica's in a place in her life where she's realizing, like, I don't necessarily know anything about who my mom really is. Like, maybe I'll find out. She was terrible in high school, too. And that she's always been awful. And I think, in some ways, like, she wants to think that. Because it's easier to just think, well, somebody is just a bad person, the end. And she's always been terrible, and she's always been malicious and spiteful, and that's it. I think that's easier. But it turns out, we find out later, her mother was actually protecting this girl. Her mother was a good, decent person. And it looks really like her addiction is what got the better of her and turned her into somebody who is like destructive. And that isn't who she is at her core. Of course, people change from high school. Who her mother was in high school may have no bearing on who she is as an adult. But I feel like high school informs a lot of who you turn out to be. You're old enough by that point that your patterns are starting to develop. Anya says, minor point, but why is Celeste laundering Duncan's clothes when he lives in a hotel? Anya's, okay. Here's my thing that I think about this. It's that Duncan's mother resents the fact that he is emancipated and does not need her. And she is doing all of these little shitty things to make herself feel like she's still his mom. Because she hasn't got a good relationship with him. And it eases her guilt a little bit. Because, like, I am sure Duncan holds a lot of resentment towards his parents. Because the two of them not only thought he was capable of murdering his sister, but then covered for him and didn't tell him the truth for fucking like a year and a half. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's finding all sorts of little nothing things to do to try and make herself feel better. Because that's like just parents, a lot of times when they fail or they perceive that they have failed, really try and do the too little too late sort of thing. It's like a boyfriend buying you flowers after he fucks somebody else. And you're like, yeah, thank you for the flowers. This totally makes up for the fact that your penis was in another woman. Like, you know, I kind of get that vibe based on how formal they are with it. Like, he's getting dressed up to go out to dinner with her. You know, there's something about the way they're interacting and the fact that he hasn't told her about Veronica. It just doesn't feel like they're close at all. And they never have been, obviously. But it's worse than I think it's been. But anyway, so I'm trying to think like where I was. Okay, so Veronica goes and talks to the deaf woman and knows some sign language that she learned from her mom, I should point out. And misunderstands the spelling of the word friend and thinks this woman called her mom a fiend. Which, if you watch the live watch, I'm immediately like, she obviously spelled friend. Can you not? I love the fact, though, that fiend and friend are only one letter apart, because that is pretty fun. So she walks away from that thinking that this woman was like low-key terrorized by her mom, maybe, in school. And it turns out the opposite is true. What actually happened was that this girl was having an affair with the principal. I don't know if he was the principal at the time. Has he been the principal this entire time? Does anybody know? Or was he like on the staff and then he wound up becoming principal later on? Either way, he was a fucking grown-ass man fucking a student. Rachel says he was the vice principal. Okay, cool. Thank you. And she got knocked up and she went to Celeste. Or no, she went to the other one, the divorce teacher, to ask her for like advice on like, what do we do? Like, should we tell somebody? Yada, yada, yada. Well, this other bitch could not keep her fucking mouth shut. So it started to spread around the school. And rather than out her friend, this young deaf woman, she decided to just say she made it all up. And act like this is completely baseless. There's nobody pregnant. It was just invented. Meanwhile, this woman has her baby, drops the baby off on the guy's doorstep, which, while not a great way to handle it, she's a fucking teenager, and I'm really not going to blame her for this. Like, this is why sex ed and birth control should be priorities in the United States of America. Regardless, she drops the baby off at this guy's house, and he, clearly not wanting said baby, cooks up a plan to drop the baby off in the bathroom at prom so that it's clearly some girl who went to prom, went in the bathroom, had the baby, threw it away, and went out and continued dancing. Now, those of you who are not American may not remember, this actually happened. I think I was probably like 14, 15 years old when this story broke, but there was a girl who was pregnant, and she hid her pregnancy pretty well because she didn't show too much. So it just looked like she had gained weight. And she wound up going to a school dance. I don't remember if it was prom or homecoming or what, but she went in the bathroom. She went into labor and had the baby, and then threw the baby in the trash and went back out on the dance floor and continued dancing like nothing was wrong. And I understand people being like absolutely horrified that anybody would be capable of literally throwing a baby in the trash and doing this kind of thing. Like, but when you are in deep denial about something that is going on with your body that would literally change your entire life, I can totally understand becoming that disconnected from compassion or a sense of responsibility, because it's like too much and you kind of check out. So clearly this dude was trying to imitate that sort of well-known scandal. And this Veronica, before she finds out that it's actually the deaf lunch lady's baby, she thinks it was Celeste, that Celeste actually got pregnant, had the baby out of wedlock, abandoned the baby in a bathroom, and then regretted it and went back and employed her own daughter, and leaps to this wild conclusion that this young blonde assistant that Celeste has following her around when she comes to Duncan's hotel is actually Celeste's daughter. And that's why Celeste has like been paying her well and is going to pay for her grad school and all of this stuff. You know, Veronica's coming to this conclusion. Meanwhile, me watching this episode, I am just like, girl, that is a crazy leap you just made. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that this is true. She tries to be like, oh, she dyes her hair blonde, but her hair is actually dark, so she's obviously Celeste's daughter. And I'm like, you know that Lily was blonde, right? Like, there's just a couple of moments of me just being like, Veronica, what are you even doing? Like, what are you talking about? It's just, I think it's supposed to be an example of her wanting so bad for Celeste to be embarrassed that she's just grasping at straws a little bit. But yeah, we find out that was not the case. And the way that this comes out, Trina is in town. She is here to teach some drama classes. Trina is one of those characters that when she first showed up, because she's being played by Allison Hannigan, the girl who played Willow in Buffy. And I have to say, later on, there's a moment where she and Charisma Carpenter, who plays Kendall, have a scene together. And I was like low-key excited because they're two Buffy characters together again for a minute. But Trina was somebody that, like, when she showed up, I didn't really buy Allison Hannigan as Trina. It just felt too put on to me. And so every time she has shown up since then, I've just been kind of like, I guess. But in this episode, I liked her better than I have before, partially because she just feels like I think maybe some of it is just that I understand her character better, I think. She's a lot more willing to own that she's just kind of a sucker for attention, that maybe she's like not even very good at what she does, but she's got her father's name behind her, and so she can use that to her advantage, and she does, and she will. And Veronica tries to set her up by recording a video and pretending that this is part of an audition tape, like that she's going to take notes on, where she gives Allison Hannigan she gives Trina a script where she's begging for the bone marrow of one of her actual parents, and she's adopted, so she doesn't even know like where she can get bone marrow that'd be compatible. And Veronica is planning to leak this to the tabloids and put Celeste on the spot with it, that it's gonna like eventually come around to, the prom baby and the rumors about Celeste. As she's walking out the door with her tape, she has an attack of conscience, and it's like, all right, I can't do this. And she goes back and she tells Trina the truth. And Trina, opportunist that she is like, no shit, you think I'm Celeste's kid? They have billions of dollars. Holy shit, yeah, we're leaking this to the press. Are you kidding me? And Veronica, who like just kind of wrestled with her own conscience, gets a bit of like, oh, sweet, I can still get Celeste to be humiliated while not feeling guilty about it because one of the people affected consented to it and wants it to happen this way. So they go and leak this information to the press, and with her being like, she tripped and fell and hit her head, so she's like in the hospital at the time. So the whole thing of her being in like her hospital gown adds to this story about how she needs bone marrow, the whole thing. So they're waiting for this, for Celeste to kind of come forward and admit that she's Trina's mom. And surprise, surprise, the lunch lady runs in and is like, oh my God, I'm your mom, actually. And I really loved this moment because you have this like brief flash of disappointment from Trina when she realizes that her mom is not a billionaire, but a lunch lady with nothing, probably. But then it quickly transitions to an expression of, oh my God, you're my mom. And they start hugging, and it's actually like briefly emotional. And I was kind of like, oh, guys, I'll let this kitten down. So I actually really liked the handling of that. And I liked that Trina has a moment as a character of being a little bit more like willing to look at the substance of a person rather than just their net worth, because she is portrayed as being so shallow so much of the time that it gets to be a little bit of a punchline. And I think it was nice that they like allowed her to have this real connection with her mom for a second. So it turns out that this woman was knocked up by the vice principal. So Allison Hannigan busts into a meeting that he's having with all the staff. and just confronts him in front of everybody about the fact that he's actually her father. And it's pretty fucking satisfying, especially because the principal is just played by this dude who is so pompous and annoying that you're just like longing to see him taken down a peg. And also the guy fucked a minor, and I am really hopeful that charges are pressed. Probably they won't be, but I would really love to see that happen. And as Veronica watches all of this unfold, she goes and sees the current vice principal, now principal, and is like, oh, you fucking set this up all on purpose, didn't you? And he's like, me? I have no idea what you mean. That would be a very devious thing to do. Who could even think of such a thing? My goodness. And she's like, yeah, all right, guy. And he pulls out his prepared principal nameplate that he's got sitting there, just waiting to bust that shit out. And that was altogether a pretty good moment, and I liked all of this. So, in terms of other things that happen in this episode, we have what's going on with Logan and Weevil. I'm really excited because, as I have said, I love the two of them being on the same side and working together, and it looks like that's what's gonna happen. I love also that in the same scene that they agree they need to work together, they also beat the ever-loving shit out of each other. This is good character work. This is 100% how they would handle this, like, without a doubt. I adore the way these two actors interact with each other. They have this like amazing chemistry weirdly between them. And I have to say, Logan gets the drop on Weevil. There's a scene, because like last episode, Weevil basically kidnaps Logan and plays Russian roulette to try and get him to talk. I personally am willing to bet there were no actual bullets in that gun. However, that's me maybe trying to like give Weevil a little bit more humanity than maybe he's really supposed to have. Meanwhile, Logan has like evicted Weevil's grandma from her apartment. So I have a hard time being on Logan's side throughout any of this. But Logan decides to get back at Weevil for kidnapping him and threatening him by getting the jump on him at his garage. Everybody beats the hell out of him. And then we see him taped to the flagpole in front of the school at the beginning of the day, the next day. And I don't like seeing Weevil brought low in this fashion. I really like Weevil. Yeah, he's obviously dangerous and violent and corrupt and, you know, participating in highly questionable activities like potentially drug dealing. I don't know if it's just because last episode he was mad that somebody was trying to get coke off him, and he got mad because he doesn't deal at school. I don't know if that was specifically it, or if it's just that he doesn't deal at all, but I suspect they must. Because, like, if you're a gang, you've got to have something that you're, like, making money from, right? So, Weevil's not, you know, a purely good person at all. But I have a lot more sympathy for somebody in his position being shitty than I do for somebody in Logan's position being shitty. Privilege, you know? So seeing him taped to this flagpole bummed me out. And I was also a little bit bummed at Veronica's reaction because she doesn't like rush up there and try and help him down. She watches and is just like, well, shit. And I know that she and Weevil have been kind of like not awesome over this past season, but I expected her to have his back a little bit more than that to like help him out. And she just doesn't. I was a bit surprised by that, you know? So then he pulls Logan into the bathroom And this is when they finally have their talk. And Logan is like, oh my God, I didn't kill Felix. Can you stop it? And surprisingly, Weevil is like, look, I know you didn't kill Felix. Like, I'm pretty sure of that now. And Logan says, well, then what the fuck? And he's like, well, I can't let you walk out of here without beating the hell out of you because of what you did to me. So we will both work together to figure out who killed Felix, and Logan's like, yeah, that's fair. And they just start to fight, and everybody can hear them beating the hell out of each other, and they both get dragged out of there, and they're bloody and bruised up. And you would never know that they're actually working together now. Sly boots. I like it. So I really am looking forward to seeing what goes on with this, because as they're being let out, one of Weevil's guys, actually two of his guys, there's the one dude who's shaved bald and he's really thin. And then there's this other dude who looks a little bit less like a gangbanger, like he's a little bit more ordinary looking. He is saying to Baldy, hey, I know he like beat the hell out of him, but that's kind of weak sauce. Like, if somebody did to me what they did to him, they'd be fucking dead. And I had to think at that moment that that dude was the one who's been setting all of this shit up and trying to undermine Weevil. This is like all a ploy. Now, it could be that the show wants me to think that they're putting that guy in that spot for me to see it as a red herring. But I'm going to go with it for right now. I'm going to call him Gang Hair, because he's like one of the few that isn't shaved bald. But Gang Hair, there's a real aggressive vibe to him that feels like he's trying to constantly point out how weak Weevil is, and that Weevil's not taking a stand on things the way that he should be. He's just, he's the one who said before about how, like, my brother asked me if it was true that the PCHers stands for, what does he say? Panty something homos? Something like that. And I'm looking back now and I'm like, you don't even have a little brother, did you? Like, you just made that shit up because you're trying to lower everyone else's trust in Weevil, and you're trying to goad Weevil into making some stupid decisions that will weaken him because he is trying so hard to keep his rep up that he, like, makes a bad misstep. So that's where I'm going with that. And I'm really hoping that Weevil starts to notice this. I just want to know who the fuck killed Felix. And there's definitely people dealing drugs out of that cigar shop, and it's weird to me how much Veronica does not want to, like, acknowledge that. It's like Logan says something to her about it, and about looking into that and pursuing that more. And I think it really stems from Veronica has gotten to a place where she doesn't want to help Logan anymore. She doesn't like the guy. He doesn't seem to, like, have good judgment. Even if he didn't kill this dude, he's still done a lot of really shitty things. And I think she'd just kind of rather not be involved in his world anymore. But at the same time, you've got to see that that's totally possible, even likely. Because she says something about how, like, oh, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Like, he was in there for so long that you finally got out of your car and went in. That's not just cigar shopping. That guy was clearly doing something. So, however that is tied in, I feel like he's got to be a connect for the fightin' Fitzpatricks, right? And that there's somebody in his crew that is working with them. Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to think, like, because really, when it comes right down to it, a lot of gangs are race-based. People tend to gravitate towards other people of their same race when they're going to be doing stuff that's sort of, like, illegal or shady at the very least. because they trust their own, right? Why would the Fightin' Fitzpatricks team up with any of Weevil's guys? Because I have a really hard time believing that a bunch of Irish gangsters are going to be at all amenable to, like, taking in a Mexican gangster into their crew. And I don't know what else they could be getting out of it except feeling like maybe Weevil's doing too well and inching in on their turf, and they want to replace him with somebody that's more manageable, maybe. But there's a lot there that I don't know about the Fitzpatricks and how they work, what they're involved in. I don't know the names of, like, anybody else on Weevil's gang. I can't think of one guy's name. So there's a lot there that I'm working blind. But yeah, I'm very interested to see where this winds up going. I'm trying to think because I know that there's another, obviously Meg's pregnancy, guys. I've talked about that quite a bit at this point, but I really do not know what to make of this. Like, somebody told me after I watched this episode that there was an alternate ending that they filmed. And I'm not sure if I should talk about it. If anybody in the chat is aware of what I'm referencing, let me know if this is safe to discuss right now. Because I'm low-key worried that that alternate ending is going to turn out to be something that they kind of do later. So I don't want to, like, spoil inadvertently, but I also do want to be like, I maybe have been spoiled for something. Rachel and Agnes both say they don't know anything about that. Okay, I'm going to just talk about it. And I apologize ahead of time if this does turn out to be, like, kind of a spoiler, but I have no idea if it is right now or not. So apparently they filmed an alternate ending to this episode, because how it ends is Veronica sneaks in to see Meg, sees that there are 2 monitors, and is like, what the fuck? And she pulls back the curtain and sees Meg's pregnant. And she's far along. Meg is like, it looks like she's going to be ready to give birth in a month or a few weeks even. In the alternate ending, she sees this, and she hears Meg's mom coming and knows that her parents are very much not wanting Veronica anywhere near their daughter. Ducks into the bathroom, hears something, and the mother leaves. And when she comes out, Meg is dead and has a pillow over her face. And Veronica walks up and picks the pillow up to see if Meg's okay. And a nurse walks in at that moment and sees Meg dead and Veronica standing there holding the pillow. And that was how the episode was going to end, with her being apparently caught murdering this girl. Which is crazy town banana pants. I'm just like, the fact that they even considered doing that, like, what, where were you going to go from there, guys? Excuse me? And that's why I'm saying, like, okay, Rachel says, I've heard of the ending. I don't think it spoils anything. And I don't think that has anything to do with what happens in the future. Okay. Because that's such a hugely different turn for the story to take that I was like, if they were even considering doing that, I feel like that has some pretty huge implications on what's going to happen later. But they wound up not going with it. And the person who, like, mentioned this to me was like, they even acted like they weren't that serious. They, like, filmed the whole thing, allegedly. But then they were like, oh yeah, we were pretty sure we weren't going to use that, though. To which I'm like, then why did you go to the trouble of filming it all? Like, I don't know. The whole thing just sounds super weird. And I was just kind of, like, taken aback at the brutality of that choice in comparison to what actually happens, which is just Veronica finding out Meg is pregnant and boom, it ends. Like, very, very different is all I'm saying. So yeah, I am at a loss here. If Meg is as far along as she is, I really don't think it's Duncan's child. However, is it possible? Maybe. I'm trying to think of exactly when in the year we're supposed to be right now, because Veronica and Logan split up at like the beginning of the summer, I think. And Duncan and her started dating a couple of weeks later. Beginning of the summer, I'm going to put that in like June. If we're in maybe October at this point, he and Meg were still dating as recently as May. It's certainly possible. And it could be part of why Meg resents Veronica being, if she already knew she was pregnant, finding out that he was with Veronica now would really get to her. Because she knows she got knocked up. At the same time, I don't see Duncan being unaware. And that would mean that he knew the whole time that she was pregnant. I don't see that. I don't see Duncan being okay with continuing to date Veronica and not tell her that. On the other hand, Duncan lied to his mom about his relationship with Veronica, so he clearly doesn't mind lying in general, and not telling Veronica that he hasn't told his mother. He's keeping something pretty important from her, and something like this, maybe he would be okay with keeping that secret. I tend to give him a sort of a Boy Scout quality in my head, but I feel like he is a Boy Scout when it comes to things that are kind of like easy black and white things. Don't bully people. Be nice to someone who is being bullied. Like, stand up for folks. Be honest about and work hard with your studies and whatever. When it comes to something like this, it is such high stakes and so fraught that I could see him not handling it super well. Or thinking he's handling it super well and really, really not. But I just have a hard time believing that he would like see the way Meg was treating Veronica and just sort of let it happen and not intervene in any way if he were at all able to. Either by going up to Meg and being like, dude, what are you doing? Can you not? Or by telling Veronica, look, she's going through some really intense shit right now, actually. And I understand that she's getting to you, but please try and be compassionate because you don't even know what she's dealing with. Can I tell you the truth that a horrible part of me is really concerned that Meg's baby is like her own father's or something because he's abusive. And we haven't seen that be physical, but parents who are abusive frequently will like inflict all of that abuse on one sibling and use them as a sort of example to the others. And maybe he uses all of his like physical and sexual abuse on Meg and then leaves it as mental abuse when it comes to her sisters or sister, whatever. I don't know. And that might explain why they don't want anybody seeing their daughter, because it could go either way. They're obviously very conservative religious people. So their daughter being pregnant, they would not want people to know, period. Like, end of sentence, because that's shameful. If it's her own dad's, that's even worse. And they'd be more secretive about that. I really wonder if the cops know that Meg is pregnant, because I feel like that would be something to really take into account in the investigation. Like, I'd feel like they'd want to do some sort of paternity testing. But unless you've got DNA to compare it to from fathers, there's not really anything conclusive that can be drawn from that, I don't think, right? They can't just like, unless they're in cahoots with 23andMe, as everybody seems to believe nowadays. It's not like they can just figure out who the daddy is. So they'd have to get DNA from like willing donors who were potentially, and if this guy was also responsible for what happened on the bus, they're certainly not going to fucking volunteer. But as far as her father, they could figure that out, I would imagine, because it's the same. Anya says, well, Meg would have half her father's DNA. So that's what I'm like. If they did a paternity test on the baby, it would show Meg's DNA and an additional set of DNA that is super similar to Meg's, which would indicate that it was her dad's, right? I guess. I don't know how DNA works, guys. Can I just be honest? I don't know what that looks like. So I am curious if the police know about this. Also, this episode, I should say, because Veronica finds the rat in the freezer and is asking her dad about it. And he says, you're right. I should have won and I should have taken over this case. And I'm like, come on, Keith. Of course you should. I'm so frustrated with him. He watched this poor girl trying to talk to Lamb and him like completely brush her off. He watched how Lamb is like, just does not give a shit about people. And I don't understand why it never sank in until now. You heard that there was an explosion on the bus and you turned that into Lamb instead of... That was really the moment you should have decided, okay, you know what? I'm invested now. But no, it's the rat that does it. What? Come on, dude. Like, I just need Keith to value himself more, is what it really comes down to. I just want him to acknowledge it's not just that you hate Lamb. You are also better at the job than him. You're not being petty. I mean, you are allowed to be petty, but that's not what I think is happening. You are just better at the job than him, and that's a fact. And he is not giving this the attention it deserves. Like 12 kids died. That feels like this should be priority number one, and yet Keith is the fucking one who finds the rat on the bus. Excuse? They should have combed that whole fucking thing, but no. So yeah, I'm a little irritated at how resistant Keith was to this. Also, can we just mention that fucking Wallace is still not back? And I don't really know what the show's doing there. Like, it's gotten to the point where I really don't care anymore. And if Wallace suddenly pops back up and I'm supposed to be reinvested in his story after all this other stuff has happened, I'm going to have a really hard time with that. Especially because Jackie also seems to have dropped completely off the face of planet Earth. And I really don't like Jackie. So I'm fine with her being gone. But if the show decides that they're going to bring Wallace back and then we have to try and pretend that Jackie's been around this entire time, I am not here for that. So I'm sort of like side-eyeing the fact that they keep bringing it up that Veronica is writing to Wallace this whole time. Because it feels like they're really trying to leave that door open. And as far as I'm concerned, that door has closed and I have moved on. I liked Wallace as a character. He deserved a better friend than Veronica. But he also deserved to be treated better as a character than to be shuffled off with this random guy. And then we don't hear from him again. Yeah, I don't know. So that's what's going on with that. I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm going to say, do my weekly whodunit. On this one, I really have no idea at this point. Like, I feel like it has to be the scale of the crime is such that I can't think of anybody who has enough motive to do something that drastic and terrible. So I'm going to stick with whoever impregnated Meg for right now. But that's super, super, super tentative. And it would make whoever got her pregnant like a huge, like a monster. Because they're willing to kill a whole bunch of kids in addition to her. So, they'd have to be like a cartoon villain for this. So yeah, guys, I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you again to Renee for commissioning this and doing the live watch for it. I really enjoy doing those. And I appreciate all of you guys helping feed me character names and information on the sidelines. So Anya says commission the next one today. Yay! Cool. Oh, good. I'm excited to watch it. Is it a live watch, Anya's, or do I get to watch it right away? Cool. I get to watch it right away. I love doing the live watches, don't get me wrong, but it's nice to not have to have patience and get to have immediate gratification after I record on one to go and watch the next one right away. So, all right. She says maybe 11 will be a live watch. Ooh, I'm excited. All right, guys. Thank you again so much. And I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.